Sarah Martinez walked through the glass doors of Henderson and Associates marketing agency on a crisp Monday morning in October. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and she wore a loose-fitting navy blue jacket over black pants. She carried herself with quiet confidence, though there was something careful about the way she moved, as if each step was calculated. The bustling office buzzed with the familiar sounds of ringing phones, clicking keyboards, and animated conversations about weekend plans. Sarah had been hired as the new senior marketing strategist, a position that came with high expectations and even higher pressure to prove herself in a company known for its competitive environment. "You must be Sarah," came a warm voice from behind the reception desk. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair smiled at her. "I'm Linda, the office manager. Welcome to the chaos." Sarah smiled back, grateful for the friendly greeting. "Thank you. I'm excited to get started. Let me show you to your desk and introduce you to the team," Linda said, coming around the desk. "Fair warning though, Monday mornings can be a bit intense around here. Everyone's trying to catch up on what happened over the weekend and prepare for the week ahead." As they walked through the open office space, Sarah noticed the mix of personalities immediately. Some people were already deep in phone conversations, others were clustered around the coffee machine discussing what sounded like a client presentation, and a few were quietly focused on their computer screens. "That's the creative team over there," Linda pointed to a section where colorful posters and design mock-ups covered the walls. "They're working on the new campaign for Peterson Electronics. And, over here," she gestured to another area, "is where our account managers sit. They're the ones who keep our clients happy and our sanity intact." Sarah nodded, taking mental notes of the office layout. She had worked in similar environments before, but each company had its own unique culture and dynamics. From what she could see so far, Henderson and Associates seemed like a professional but relaxed workplace. "Your desk is right here," Linda said, stopping beside a clean workstation near a large window. "You'll be working closely with the strategy team, and your supervisor, Rebecca Chen, should be in shortly. She's fantastic, really knows her stuff." "This looks perfect," Sarah said, setting down her bag and looking around her new workspace. The natural light from the window was a nice touch, and she could see she'd have a good view of the downtown area. "I'll let you get settled in," Linda said. "There's a team meeting at 10 o'clock in conference room B. Rebecca will fill you in on the current projects and introduce you to everyone properly." As Linda walked away, Sarah began organizing her desk and pulling out a few personal items she'd brought to make the space feel more like her own. She placed a small framed photo of her family near her computer monitor and arranged her pens and notebooks in the desk drawer. "New meat, huh?" Sarah looked up to see a man in his early 30s standing beside her desk. He was tall and lean, with perfectly styled blonde hair and an expensive-looking suit. His smile seemed friendly enough, but there was something in his eyes that made Sarah immediately cautious. "I'm sorry," she said, standing up to face him. "Fresh blood, new hire, whatever you want to call it," he said with a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm Derek Hoffman, Senior Account Executive. I run the Peterson Electronics account, among others." "Sarah Martinez, Senior Marketing Strategist," she replied, extending her hand for a professional handshake. Derek's grip was firm, perhaps a bit too firm, and he held on a moment longer than necessary. "So, Sarah, what's your background? Where are you coming from?" "I was at Morrison Creative for about 4 years, working on strategy for their tech and healthcare clients," Sarah answered. "Before that, I was at a smaller agency in Austin." "Morrison Creative, impressive," Derek said, though his tone suggested he wasn't particularly impressed. "I've heard they have a pretty relaxed atmosphere over there. Things move a bit faster here at Henderson. We don't really have time for people who can't keep up." Sarah felt her jaw tighten slightly at the implied challenge, but she kept her voice level. "I'm sure I'll adjust just fine. I'm looking forward to contributing to the team." "We'll see," Derek said with that same smile. "Speaking of which, I hope you're ready to put in some serious hours. We've got the Peterson presentation coming up next month, and it's going to require all hands on deck. Late nights, weekend work, the whole 9 yards." I understand the commitment required for important projects, Sarah replied. Good, because I've seen too many people come in here thinking they can coast by, especially people who. He paused, looking her up and down in a way that made Sarah uncomfortable, who might have gotten used to taking things easy elsewhere. Before Sarah could respond, a woman's voice called out from across the office. Derek, stop terrorizing the new hire. They both turned to see a petite Asian woman in her mid-30s approaching them with a coffee mug in hand and an amused expression on her face. She wore a burgundy blazer over dark jeans and had her black hair cut in a stylish bob. Rebecca, Derek said, his demeanor shifting slightly. I was just welcoming Sarah to the team. I'm sure you were, Rebecca said dryly. Sarah, I'm Rebecca Chen, your supervisor. I see you've already met our resident workaholic. Nice to meet you, Sarah said, feeling relieved to have Rebecca's intervention. Derek here likes to test new team members right away, Rebecca continued. It's like some kind of initiation ritual. Don't take it personally. I just want to make sure everyone's committed, Derek said defensively. The Peterson account is worth millions to this company. And everyone is committed, Rebecca replied firmly. Now, don't you have a client call in 10 minutes? Derek glanced at his watch and his expression shifted to one of mild panic. Right, the Williams Group call. I should go prepare. He turned back to Sarah. We'll talk more later. Welcome to Henderson. As Derek hurried away, Rebecca shook her head with a mix of amusement and exasperation. Don't let him get to you. Derek's actually good at his job, but he has this need to establish dominance with everyone he meets. It's like watching a nature documentary sometimes. Sarah laughed, feeling herself relax for the first time since Derek had approached her desk. Thanks for the rescue. He seemed intense. That's one word for it, Rebecca said. Come on, let me show you around properly and we can grab some coffee before the meeting. I want to fill you in on what you'll be working on and give you the real story about how things work around here. They walked toward the kitchen area, passing by various workstations and meeting rooms. Rebecca pointed out key people and explained their roles, giving Sarah a much more detailed picture of the company structure than the brief overview Linda had provided. So the Peterson Electronics account that Derek mentioned, Rebecca began as they reached the coffee machine, it's definitely our biggest client right now. They're a mid-sized company that makes components for smart home devices. The contract is up for renewal next year, which is why everyone's a bit on edge about the presentation. What kind of strategy work will I be doing for them? Sarah asked, accepting the cup of coffee Rebecca handed her. That's where it gets interesting, Rebecca said, lowering her voice slightly. The current strategy isn't really working. Their sales have been flat for the past 2 quarters, and their brand awareness is actually declining in key demographics. Derek keeps pushing the same old approaches because they're what he's comfortable with, but we need fresh thinking. Sarah nodded, already intrigued by the challenge. What do you think the main issues are? Honestly? I think they're trying to be everything to everyone, and it's making them invisible in the marketplace. Plus, their messaging is very technical and male-focused, which is fine for part of their audience, but they're missing huge opportunities with other consumer segments. Have you shared these concerns with Derek? Rebecca's expression became more serious. I've tried, but Derek has very definite ideas about how things should be done. He tends to dismiss input that doesn't align with his vision, especially if it comes from. She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully, certain team members. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Let's just say Derek has some old-fashioned ideas about who should be making strategic decisions around here. But don't worry about that for now. Focus on doing good work and proving yourself. The results will speak for themselves. They made their way toward conference room B, where other team members were already gathering for the meeting. Sarah could see through the glass walls that about 8 people were seated around a large oval table, reviewing papers and chatting quietly. Before we go in, Rebecca said, stopping just outside the conference room, I should probably mention that Derek wasn't exaggerating about the workload. The next few weeks are going to be pretty demanding. Are you okay with putting in some longer hours? Absolutely, Sarah replied without hesitation. I'm here to do whatever it takes to make the project successful. Good. And if you ever need to step away for any reason, doctor's appointments, personal issues, whatever, just let me know. I believe in work-life balance, even during crunch time. Sarah appreciated the thoughtfulness, though she wondered if Rebecca had picked up on something in her demeanor or appearance that suggested she might need extra accommodations. She made a mental note to be more careful about how she presented herself. They entered the conference room, and Rebecca began introducing Sarah to the team. There was Mike from the creative department, a friendly guy with thick-rimmed glasses who immediately started talking about color theory and brand psychology. Jennifer and Tom were the other account managers, both seeming more relaxed and approachable than Derek. Lisa worked in market research and had an impressive background in consumer behavior analysis. And you already met Derek, Rebecca said as he rejoined the group, looking slightly flustered from his client call. How did the Williams Group call go? Jennifer asked. They want to push back the launch date by 3 weeks, Derek said, rubbing his forehead. Apparently their production team is behind schedule, which means we need to adjust our entire media buy strategy. That's the third client this month who's had production delays, Tom observed. Maybe we should start building buffer time into our timelines. Or maybe our clients need to learn how to manage their own operations, Derek replied sharply. We can't be constantly adjusting our work because other people can't meet deadlines. Sarah noticed the subtle tension in the room at Derek's comment. It seemed like this was an ongoing source of frustration for him, and possibly a point of disagreement with the rest of the team. Well, Rebecca said diplomatically, let's focus on what we can control. Sarah, I thought it would be good for you to hear about our current projects and see how you might contribute. For the next hour, the team walked through their active accounts and upcoming deliverables. Sarah listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions and offering a few observations based on her previous experience. She was impressed by the quality of work the team was producing, though she could see some areas where strategic improvements might be beneficial. The Peterson presentation is scheduled for November 15th, Derek said when they reached that agenda item. Their executive team will be here for a full-day review of our strategy recommendations and creative concepts. This is basically our chance to prove we deserve to keep their business. What's the current strategy direction? Sarah asked. Derek's expression became slightly defensive. We're focusing on their core strengths, technical innovation and reliability. The messaging emphasizes product specifications and performance metrics that matter to their primary customer base. Who is their primary customer base? Sarah continued. Tech-savvy early adopters, primarily male, ages 25 to 45, with above-average income, Derek rattled off. These are the customers who drive adoption of new smart home technologies. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. And how has that audience responded to the current campaigns? The response has been adequate, Derek said, clearly not happy with the question. Market penetration in that demographic is steady. Lisa, the market research analyst, cleared her throat gently. Actually, our latest data shows that engagement rates in that demographic have dropped by about 15% over the past 6 months. And we're seeing much stronger response rates in some segments we haven't been targeting directly. Derek's jaw tightened. Which segments? Women aged 30 to 50, particularly those with families. Also, older adults who are interested in home security and convenience features. The technical specifications messaging isn't resonating with these groups, but when we test concepts focused on lifestyle benefits and ease of use, the response is much stronger. Sarah found this information fascinating, but she could see Derek was not pleased with the direction of the conversation. She decided to tread carefully. That's really interesting data, she said diplomatically. It might be worth exploring how we could maintain the strong technical messaging for the core audience while also developing complementary approaches for these other segments. We don't have time to reinvent the wheel, Derek said firmly. The Peterson team specifically asked for campaigns that highlight their technological advantages. That's what we're delivering. Rebecca stepped in smoothly. I think what Sarah is suggesting is that we might be able to accomplish both objectives, showcasing the technology while also making it more accessible to broader audiences. Look, Derek said, his voice taking on a slightly condescending tone, I understand that everyone wants to contribute ideas, but we need to stay focused on what actually works. I've been managing this account for 3 years, and I know what Peterson Electronics needs. Sarah felt her cheeks flush slightly at the dismissive tone, but she kept her expression neutral. Of course. I was just thinking about ways to potentially expand their market reach while keeping the core message intact. Market expansion is a nice idea in theory, Derek continued, but, in practice, it usually means diluting the message and confusing the audience. Sometimes the best strategy is to do one thing really well rather than trying to be everything to everyone. I agree with doing things well, Sarah replied calmly, but I'm not sure expanding the target audience necessarily means diluting the message. It might mean finding different ways to communicate the same core benefits. Derek leaned back in his chair and gave Sarah a look that was clearly meant to put her in her place. Sarah, I'm sure you had some great ideas at your previous job, but Henderson operates differently. We focus on proven strategies rather than experimental approaches, especially with our most important clients. The room fell silent for a moment, and Sarah could feel everyone's discomfort with Derek's dismissive attitude. She was about to respond when Rebecca intervened again. I think we all want the Peterson presentation to be successful, Rebecca said diplomatically. Why don't we table this discussion for now and focus on the immediate deliverables? Derek, can you walk us through the timeline for the creative concepts? As Derek launched into a detailed explanation of deadlines and responsibilities, Sarah found herself studying his demeanor more carefully. She had encountered colleagues like him before, people who felt threatened by new perspectives and responded by asserting their authority more aggressively. She would need to be strategic about how she approached working with him. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, covering various administrative details and project updates. Sarah took careful notes and asked clarifying questions when appropriate, but she was more cautious about offering strategic input after Derek's earlier reaction. When the meeting finally ended, people began filing out of the conference room in small groups, chatting about their individual projects and lunch plans. Sarah gathered her materials and was preparing to leave when Rebecca approached her. Can you stay for a few minutes? Rebecca asked quietly. I'd like to chat privately about how you'll be fitting into the Peterson project. Sarah nodded, and they waited until the room was empty except for them. I want to apologize for Derek's attitude in there, Rebecca began. That wasn't appropriate, and you shouldn't have to deal with that kind of dismissiveness, especially on your first day. It's okay, Sarah said, though she appreciated Rebecca's acknowledgement. I've worked with challenging personalities before. I'm sure you have, but that doesn't make it acceptable, Rebecca replied. The truth is, your observations about the Peterson strategy were spot on. Lisa's research supports exactly what you were suggesting, and I've been trying to get Derek to consider a more nuanced approach for months. Why hasn't he been receptive? Rebecca sighed. Honestly? I think Derek sees any suggestion for change as a criticism of his current approach, and he takes it personally. Plus, he has some traditional views about who should be making strategic decisions in a business environment. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Traditional views? Let's just say he's made some comments in the past that suggest he thinks women and people from certain backgrounds might not understand serious business strategy the same way he does. It's never anything overt enough to file a complaint about, but the pattern is pretty clear. Sarah felt a familiar knot of frustration in her stomach. She had encountered this attitude before, though it was usually more subtle in professional environments. How do you suggest I handle it? Focus on building relationships with the rest of the team and proving yourself through your work, Rebecca advised. Derek may be the lead on Peterson, but he's not your only colleague here. Mike, Jennifer, Tom, and Lisa are all great to work with, and they'll judge you based on your contributions, not your background. What about the Peterson presentation? It sounds like Derek has very specific ideas about what should be included. He does, but I still have some input as the strategy supervisor. I'm thinking we might be able to develop some of your ideas as additional concepts or alternative approaches that complement Derek's main presentation. That way, we're not directly challenging his plan, but we're giving Peterson some options to consider." Sarah nodded, appreciating Rebecca's diplomatic approach. "That sounds like a good compromise." "Just be prepared for Derek to resist even that much change," Rebecca warned. "And, unfortunately, he might become more difficult to work with as the presentation gets closer. High-pressure situations tend to bring out his worst impulses." "I can handle difficult colleagues," Sarah said with more confidence than she felt. "I'm sure you can," Rebecca replied. "But, if things ever become truly problematic, please come to me. My job is to make sure this team functions effectively, and that includes making sure everyone is treated with respect." As they left the conference room together, Sarah felt grateful to have Rebecca's support, but also concerned about the challenges ahead. Working with Derek was clearly going to require careful navigation, and she would need to prove herself quickly to earn credibility with the rest of the team. The rest of the morning passed relatively smoothly. Rebecca introduced Sarah to a few people she hadn't met yet and gave her access to the shared drives where previous Peterson materials were stored. Sarah spent time reviewing past campaigns and research reports, trying to get a complete picture of the account's history and current status. Around lunchtime, she noticed Derek heading toward her desk with what appeared to be a thick folder of documents. "Sarah," he said, dropping the folder on her desk with a small thud, "I've got your first assignment." She looked at the folder, which was easily 3 inches thick and labeled Peterson Historical Data. "What would you like me to do with this?" "I need you to go through all of this material and create a comprehensive summary of our campaign performance over the past 3 years. Include metrics, audience response data, media spend efficiency, everything. I want it organized chronologically and cross-referenced by campaign theme." Sarah flipped through the folder briefly and estimated it contained several hundred pages of reports, spreadsheets, and presentation materials. "When do you need this completed?" "End of the week," Derek said casually. "Friday afternoon, specifically. I'm meeting with Peterson's marketing director on Monday, and I want to have all the historical context fresh in my mind." Sarah did a quick mental calculation. Today was Monday, which gave her 4 full days to analyze what looked like 3 years' worth of campaign data. It was definitely doable, but it would require long hours and careful attention to detail. "I can have that ready for you," she said professionally. "Good," Derek replied. "And, Sarah? I want this to be thorough. Peterson is very detail-oriented, and they'll notice if we miss anything important. This is your chance to show whether you can handle the level of precision required for our top accounts." After Derek walked away, Sarah opened the folder and began organizing the materials by date and campaign type. It was clear that this assignment was partly a test. Derek wanted to see how she handled a large, complex project under tight deadlines. But it was also an opportunity. By thoroughly analyzing the historical data, she would gain deep insights into what had worked and what hadn't for Peterson over the years. As she worked, Sarah found herself settling into the rhythm of her new workplace. Her colleagues seemed friendly and professional, and the work itself was challenging and interesting. The only dark cloud on the horizon was Derek, but she had dealt with difficult personalities before. What Derek didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Sarah had faced much bigger challenges than a demanding colleague and tight deadlines. The careful way she moved, the loose-fitting jacket she wore, the quiet confidence in her demeanor, these were all adaptations she had made to navigate a world that was sometimes more complicated than it appeared on the surface. But, for now, she was just Sarah Martinez, the new senior marketing strategist, ready to prove herself in a competitive industry. The rest of her story would unfold in its own time. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah's first day at Henderson and Associates, and she had fallen into a steady routine. Each morning, she arrived at the office 30 minutes early, using the quiet time to review her priorities and prepare for the day ahead. Her analysis of the Peterson historical data had been completed on schedule and had apparently impressed Rebecca, though Derek's only comment had been a brief "adequate work" delivered without making eye contact. The October weather had grown cooler, and Sarah had settled into wearing her navy blue jacket almost constantly in the office. She told herself it was because the building's air conditioning was aggressive, but she knew the real reason ran deeper than comfort. The jacket had become like armor, a protective barrier that helped her navigate her new workplace with confidence. On this particular Wednesday morning, Sarah was deep in spreadsheet analysis when she heard Derek's voice rising from the direction of conference room A. She glanced up to see him through the glass walls, gesturing emphatically while speaking on his phone. His face was flushed, and, even from a distance, she could tell he was agitated. "Trouble in paradise," came a voice from behind her. Sarah turned to see Mike from the creative team setting a steaming cup of coffee on the desk next to hers. Mike had become one of her favorite colleagues over the past few weeks. He was talented, funny, and completely unpretentious about his work. "What's going on?" Sarah asked, glancing back toward the conference room. "Peterson called an emergency meeting for this afternoon," Mike explained, settling into his chair. "Apparently, their latest sales figures are worse than expected, and their board is starting to ask tough questions about their marketing spend." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. "How much worse?" "Bad enough that they're considering bringing in additional agencies to pitch for part of their business," Mike said grimly. "Derek's been on damage control mode since the call came in about an hour ago." This was not good news. Sarah had been working on several strategic concepts for Peterson, developing the alternative approaches that Rebecca had suggested. If the client was already doubting the current strategy's effectiveness, it might be the perfect time to present some fresh thinking. But it could also mean Derek would become even more defensive about protecting his existing approach. "Do you know what they want to discuss in the meeting?" Sarah asked. "Rebecca's trying to find out now," Mike replied. "But, from what I overheard, it sounds like they want a complete review of our strategy and immediate recommendations for improving their market performance." Sarah nodded, her mind already racing through possibilities. She had spent considerable time analyzing Peterson's market position and had identified several opportunities that weren't being addressed in the current campaigns. If Derek was open to collaboration, this crisis could actually be turned into an opportunity. "Mike," she said carefully, "what's your read on Derek's willingness to consider new ideas when he's under pressure?" Mike raised his eyebrows and gave her a look that suggested he knew exactly what she was thinking. "Let's just say that stress doesn't bring out Derek's collaborative side. When he feels like his territory is threatened, he tends to double down on whatever he was already doing. Even if doubling down might not be the best strategy." "Especially then," Mike said with a wry smile. "Derek's got a lot riding on the Peterson account. It's his biggest success story, and losing it would be a major blow to his reputation here." Sarah understood the dynamics, but she also felt a growing sense of urgency about the situation. If Peterson was genuinely considering bringing in other agencies, Henderson and Associates needed to present their strongest possible strategic thinking, not just defend the status quo. "I should probably get back to my desk," Mike said, standing up with his coffee. "But, Sarah? If you're thinking about suggesting some of those strategic alternatives you've been working on, you might want to talk to Rebecca first. She'll know the best way to approach Derek about it." As Mike walked away, Sarah pulled up the documents she had been developing over the past few weeks. Her analysis showed several clear opportunities for Peterson to expand their market reach without abandoning their core technical positioning. She had identified specific demographic segments that were underserved by current smart home marketing, and she had developed messaging frameworks that could appeal to these audiences while maintaining the brand's credibility with existing customers. More importantly, her research suggested that Peterson's declining sales were partly due to increased competition from companies that were successfully marketing similar technologies to broader audiences. If Peterson continued to focus exclusively on their traditional customer base, they would likely continue losing market share. Sarah was reviewing her competitive analysis when Rebecca appeared at her desk, looking unusually tense. "Sarah, can I speak with you privately for a few minutes?" Rebecca asked quietly. They walked to a small meeting room near the back of the office, away from the main work areas. Rebecca closed the door and sat down across from Sarah with a serious expression. "I'm sure you've heard about the Peterson situation," Rebecca began. "Mike filled me in on the basics. It sounds like they're not happy with their current results. That's putting it mildly, Rebecca said. Their third quarter sales were down 18% compared to the same period last year, and their market share has dropped in every demographic category we track. Sarah winced. Those were significant declines that would definitely get a board's attention. The emergency meeting this afternoon is essentially a review of our entire strategic approach, Rebecca continued. Peterson's marketing director is coming with their VP of sales and their head of business development. They want to see data, analysis, and recommendations for immediate course corrections. What does Derek want to present? Rebecca's expression became more troubled. That's where it gets complicated. Derek's planning to focus on external factors, increased competition, challenging economic conditions, seasonal fluctuations in the smart home market. He wants to argue that the strategy is sound but that market conditions are temporarily unfavorable. Sarah could see the problem immediately. But if their competitors are gaining market share while Peterson is losing it, that suggests the issue isn't just market conditions. Exactly, Rebecca said. And Peterson's team is smart enough to see through that kind of deflection. They're going to want solutions, not excuses. What about the alternative concepts we've been developing? Have you discussed those with Derek? Rebecca sighed. I tried to bring them up this morning, but Derek shut down the conversation immediately. He said this isn't the time for experimental thinking and that we need to stick with proven approaches. Sarah felt frustrated but not surprised. So what's the plan? I'm hoping you'll come to the meeting this afternoon, Rebecca said. Derek doesn't know I'm asking you, and he might not be happy about it, but I think Peterson needs to see that we have strategic thinkers on the team who understand their challenges. You want me to present the alternative concepts? Not exactly, Rebecca said carefully. I want you to be there as support, ready to contribute to the discussion if appropriate opportunities arise. Derek will lead the presentation, but if Peterson asks questions that require deeper strategic thinking, I want someone there who can provide thoughtful answers. Sarah understood what Rebecca was really asking. She wanted Sarah to be prepared to step in if Derek's defensive approach wasn't resonating with the client. What should I bring? Your analysis of their competitive landscape and your demographic research. And, Sarah? Rebecca paused, looking directly at her. I know this is an awkward position to put you in, especially since you're still relatively new to the team. But Peterson is too important to this company for us to let personal dynamics get in the way of good strategy. After Rebecca left, Sarah spent the rest of the morning preparing for the afternoon meeting. She reviewed her competitive analysis, updated her demographic research with the latest available data, and organized her materials so she could quickly reference specific information if needed. Around noon, Derek appeared at her desk with a stack of presentation materials and a stern expression. Rebecca tells me you're joining the Peterson meeting this afternoon, he said without preamble. Yes, she thought it would be helpful to have additional strategic support available, Sarah replied diplomatically. Derek's jaw tightened. Sarah, I want to be very clear about something. This meeting is critical to our relationship with Peterson, and there's no room for experimenting with untested ideas. I'll be leading the discussion, and I need to know that you'll support the strategy we've already developed rather than confusing things with alternative approaches. Sarah chose her words carefully. My goal is to support whatever approach will be most effective for Peterson's business objectives. That's not what I asked, Derek said, his voice becoming more insistent. I asked whether you'll support our existing strategy rather than undermining it with speculative alternatives. The word undermining stung, but Sarah kept her expression neutral. I understand that consistency is important in client presentations. If you'd like me to review the materials beforehand so I'm fully prepared to support your presentation, I'm happy to do that. Derek seemed slightly mollified by this response, though he still looked wary. Fine. But I want you to understand that Peterson specifically requested this meeting to review our current strategy, not to explore new directions. They want to see results from what we've already been doing, not start over with different approaches. After Derek walked away, Sarah wondered if he was accurately representing Peterson's intentions or if he was interpreting their request through the lens of his own preferences. In her experience, clients who called emergency meetings after disappointing results were usually open to strategic adjustments, not just tactical improvements. The afternoon meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock in the main conference room. Sarah arrived a few minutes early and found Rebecca already there, setting up presentation materials and testing the audiovisual equipment. Derek was nowhere to be seen, which suggested he was probably doing some last-minute preparation. "How are you feeling about this?" Rebecca asked quietly. "Ready to be helpful however I can," Sarah replied. "What's your sense of Peterson's mood going into this?" "Concerned but not panicked," Rebecca said. "Their marketing director, Janet Reeves, is very analytical and results-focused. She'll want to see concrete data and practical solutions. The VP of Sales, Robert Chen, is more relationship-focused but also very direct about what's working and what isn't." Derek entered the conference room carrying his presentation materials and laptop, looking like a man preparing for battle. His suit was perfectly pressed, his hair was immaculately styled, and he carried himself with the kind of aggressive confidence that suggested he was ready to defend his territory at all costs. "Is everything set up correctly?" he asked, not bothering with pleasantries. "All ready," Rebecca confirmed. "The Peterson team should be here in about 10 minutes. Derek spent the remaining time reviewing his notes and practicing key talking points under his breath. Sarah used the time to quickly scan through his presentation slides, which focused heavily on historical performance metrics and industry trend data. She noticed that there was very little forward-looking strategic thinking and no acknowledgement of the competitive challenges that her research had identified. At exactly 2 o'clock, Linda from the front desk escorted 3 people into the conference room. Janet Reeves was a woman in her 40s with short auburn hair and an all-business demeanor. Robert Chen was a tall man with graying temples who smiled warmly but had sharp, evaluative eyes. The third person was someone Sarah didn't recognize, a younger man who was introduced as David Kim, Peterson's head of business development. "Thank you for making time for this meeting on short notice," Janet said as everyone settled around the conference table. "As you know, our third quarter results were disappointing, and we need to understand what adjustments we can make to improve our performance going forward." Derek launched into his presentation with characteristic confidence, walking through market data and campaign performance metrics in careful detail. His slides were professionally designed and his delivery was polished, but Sarah noticed that the Peterson team seemed increasingly restless as the presentation continued. "Derek," Robert interrupted about 15 minutes in, "I appreciate the historical context, but what I'm not hearing is analysis of why our competitors seem to be gaining traction while we're losing ground." Derek's expression tightened slightly. "The competitive landscape has become more challenging, certainly, but I believe our strategy remains fundamentally sound. What we're seeing is primarily a result of temporary market fluctuations rather than strategic shortcomings." David Kim leaned forward. "Can you be more specific about these market fluctuations?" "Because our analysis suggests that overall smart home market growth has actually accelerated this year." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. David was right, her research showed that the smart home market was growing rapidly, which made Peterson's declining performance even more concerning. Derek shuffled through his materials, clearly unprepared for this level of detailed questioning. "Well, there are various factors: seasonal buying patterns, economic uncertainty, increased promotional spending by competitors." "Derek," Janet said diplomatically but firmly, "we're not looking to assign blame or make excuses. We need to understand what we can do differently to improve our results. What strategic recommendations do you have for the fourth quarter and beyond?" This was the moment Sarah had been dreading. Derek's presentation had focused almost entirely on explaining past performance rather than proposing future solutions, and now the client was asking exactly the kinds of questions that his defensive approach couldn't answer effectively. Derek cleared his throat and flipped to a slide titled Tactical Optimizations. "I recommend that we increase our media spend in the channels that have shown the strongest historical performance, refine our messaging to emphasize Peterson's technological advantages more clearly, and expand our presence at industry trade.